Hi everyone, it's me again, and I want to welcome you to my fourth live stream about Blender and why it is not so difficult. Because people always think that Blender is extremely difficult and nobody can learn it, and no, that's not true, and I want to prove it. So thank you very much for tuning in, and I thought we'd have a look at textures this time and what you can do with textures. And there's actually a lot to this topic, so we will have a look at the basics and maybe a bit more advanced stuff if there are questions that are coming up about that. So let me have a look. I think I didn't show the Blender chat URL this time. I will post it. I will post it in the YouTube chat in a moment. I can find it. Because I created it last time and it is gone now, so I guess I have to create it again. Oh, difficult. No, it's still there. Okay. Just have to look it up. Okay, there it is. Okay, you can see it now in the YouTube chat. And if you don't have a YouTube channel, you can't join the chat. So I just sent you the Blender chat where you have to have a Blender ID, which is just signing up basically, and you don't really have to do much else. But if you want, you can also just talk in the YouTube chat, and I will see that as well. Hopefully, I will do my best to follow both chats at the same time. And on Twitter, I guess I should. Yeah, just tweet it again. So, okay. Let's start with a few things that you need to know about texturing. So, I guess. Yeah, okay. Yeah, the Blender chat is, it uses Rocket Chat, and Rocket Chat is a bit weird sometimes. So, you can't always see if the channel that you are in is actually active. That's at least what happens to me. I am in that channel, but I can't see it in the list of my channels. Yeah, I have to actually send something to the channel. That's weird. Okay, now I know I am in that channel. All right, so what do you need to know about textures? There is, of course, you can see on the Diffuse. It's a very, very important thing in Blender. You always have that default cube when you start up. And on this default cube, you can see there is basically no texture at all. And contrary to this guy who is meowing at me, has a pretty texture which you can't see right now. It's pretty, a really pretty texture. Right, and let's see if we can make a really pretty texture for this default cube. Or let's just make a scene. Maybe saw the intro loop where I built a street with a light and a background image. Maybe we can just try to replicate something like that. So for texturing, the most important thing, of course, is the color texture. And that is called a diffuse texture because it reflects all the light evenly in all directions. So it's a diffuse reflection. Yeah, our cat wants to join in. Let's see. There you go. Yeah, now you can be on camera. Hello, Leonardo. This is Leonardo, and he's making noise. Right. Okay. Should we put a cat texture on this one? No, let's just go and see what is important when you try to texture your cube. One thing you have to tell Blender is how the texture that you want to put on your model is supposed to be placed. So if you just put a texture on it, I can just do that for. So yeah, we go to the shading tab in Blender. I'm using Blender 2.91 alpha. It should be very, very similar to 2.8 if you use the stable 2.8 LTS version. I recommend always, if you're doing this as a hobby, get the absolute latest version of Blender because there are all the newest features and it usually is pretty stable. While I was making that intro loop, it only crashed once. Very good. Okay, so shading. Texturing is part of shading. And this looks a bit weird when you move around here because in the background there's a blurry image and this box is just white and nothing is happening. This is because the shading workspace, this is called the workspace, wants to give you the best all-around view all around your object. So they put an image in the background and an environment image in the background. Those of you who know all these things, it's an HDRI image that also provides lighting so that we can see what happens with our texture. Down here is the area where we will see our shading setup. And texturing is, or everything that happens on the surface of a box like this is called shading, because you are adding some shades of color to the surface. So how do we do that? In Blender, there is a concept of materials, and every face of an object, if I go into edit mode, which you can do with the tab key, every face of an object like this, into face select mode like this. This is a face, can have a different material. So one face could be like stone, the next face could be glass, and the next face here could be, I don't know, grass or something like that. So different colors, different images. So materials, how do we use them? On the right side, it's a bit small here. Let me go back to the layout for a moment. It's a bit bigger. So it's the same thing here. This is the object. This is the properties of the object. It's the properties panel. By default, it's on the right side. And this already is the materials list. You have a lot of things up here where you can go through and set up a lot of things about this object and the scene. Right now we are looking at materials, so we go down here to this mirror ball icon. And it's red means it has something to do with materials, textures, colors. So it's a red icon. And this is the materials list. Right now you can see there's no material on there, so it's just gray. And what we can do, I will expand this a bit. What we can do is add a material slot right here. Now we have a slot where we can drop in a material. Let me just have a look here. Something happened. Okay. Hello, DinoX. I see you in the chat. Great. Okay, so I know that the Blender chat works. And the YouTube chat works as well. Hello, Sarah. I see you there. Okay. Okay, so material slot. For a new material, so for a material to come up on your box, you have to add a new material. For that, you have to have a material slot. It's a bit weird, this setup. You have to add a slot and then a new material, but it can be very important later when you do more advanced stuff. Right now, it's just important. Create a new material slot, add a new material, and we'll call it. It will call it material by itself. Let's just say it is box material 1. Always a good idea to rename your stuff, like this box, for example. F2, rename, and this is my box. So you can find it when you're looking at the scene outline in the outliner. Nicely named. So up here is the outliner, and there is our mesh. This is the mesh with all the vertices and edges and faces, and there's our box material. I can even rename the mesh, my box mesh, if I want to. Right, so the box material is up here. It's still white because it's a default material. And we can see that down here. I'm scrolling down. Let me enable my keys so you can look at the lower left what I'm doing. A bit small, I think. Yeah. Now you can see on the lower left which keys I am pressing and what I'm doing with the mouse. So scrolling down, you can see all the setup for this material. That's a lot of stuff. Let me just make it a bit wider. A lot of stuff, and again, you don't have to know all of it. You just need a few things right now. So like the base color. Base color is just what color does the object appear in when there is no texture applied. So right now it's white. You go up here to the top right to the materials preview so we can see it. And I can just click on the color, and there's a color wheel coming up. I can change the color. Now you can see the box is changing color as well. It just takes up the color that we have here. Red. Now it's a red box. Very simple thing. And to see how multiple materials work, we can just go back up here, add a new material, slot in this case, new material, box material 2. Oh, let's just call this one so we can actually see what it is. Red. And let's call this one, I don't know, blue. Box material blue. Right now it is still white, even though I called it blue. I need to change that. Blue. Blue. Oh, it's a very dark blue. Let's take a lighter blue. Like this. So now we have a red material and we have a blue material. Still only see a red one here because all the faces are using the same material, the first one that we created. So we go back to edit mode, or just press the tab key and the 3 key to go to face select. And then we can select faces on our cube. Moving around in the viewport, I hope you can see that with the middle mouse and shift middle mouse and on the scroll wheel on my mouse. So I'm just looking around the cube. Just picking out 2 of the faces with shift. You can select 2 of the faces. Click and then choose the material you want on that face, and then you say assign. So you're assigning the material to the faces of your mesh. That's how it works in Blender. So now there is a blue material on it, and you can see it if you go back to the object mode. There we go. Now we have blue material and red material on the same object. This is how basic coloring works on faces and with the materials you can see on the right side. So it's just colors right now. It's no texturing yet. So to do the texturing, how do we do that? First, you have to find a good picture, basically, that you want to use, and pictures or the colors of a texture is not the only thing that defines the material. As you can see down here, there's a lot of other things that we are getting to in a moment that will be important for a material. For example, some materials are reflective, so like a mirror. Some materials are not, they're just diffuse. You can't see anything reflecting in it, it's just a plain color. Some materials have parts that are reflective and parts that are not. Some materials have surface imperfections like scratches or smudges, fingerprints. And other materials, again, they emit light, they're emissive. All this stuff you can set up in the materials here. And to do that, you need maps. Another word, maps. What is a map? A map is, again, a texture that defines an area on your texture. And we can see that in just a minute. So let's find a good image to put on here. Let's just say we want to make this a brick wall. Let's make the blue text, no, the red texture is on the sides. Let's take the red the red texture, make it a brick wall instead. So how do we do that? We go back to the material and we find an image of a brick wall. Where do we get one? You can just use any image search you want, but if you want to publish your render or doing something more important than just learning Blender, you will need to use a texture you have permissions to publish. And for that, I can recommend a site like this one, CC0 Textures, or there are others. Just search for royalty-free textures, where you can download textures and materials that are set up, ready to use for your 3D modeling. And we can go for like brick. Let's see what we can find here. Quite a lot, actually. The free sites, of course, are not always don't always have the largest selection, but it's good to get a start. And if you really get serious about 3D modeling, you can just purchase a plan with a commercial texture provider, or make them yourself. Right, clicking on, let's see, bricks 23 in this case. Now you have a lot of choices. For good renders, you want a bigger resolution. For fast renders or for games, you want a smaller resolution, because real-time rendering really wants to have as little data as possible. Right now, for us, for trying things out, 2K JPEG will be absolutely fine. It is lossy compression, so there will be artifacts, but we won't really see them. Or we can take the PNG versions, which don't have artifacts. Let's take this. Whoa. Okay, let's have a look at that in a moment. Okay, let's see. PNGs, 2K. Download them. File. And we should be able to find them if we change our shader. Because the shader still is just using colors. Let's go back to shading. This is what we see now. This is probably a bit scary with all these things. These are called nodes. This is one node, this is another node, and this is called a connection between the nodes, or link. Some people call it a noodle from one output to the input right here. Let's just ignore that it looks so scary. It is just the same thing as we had before on the right side here. It's just displayed as a node, and we can just move them around. So for our texture, we need to add it here. Or let's do it right here. Make sure we have the right object selected. And put the texture on it. I'm still in the world. I want to be in the object right here. Red material. And let's go here, and you can see there are options coming up. We want the image texture. That's the first thing that we want to do. Just put an image on the sides of this box. This is coming up here. Now it's connected from the color output to the base color input. Now the color is gone that we set up. The red color that we set up is replaced by the texture. So let's pick the texture. Here you can see we have a lot of options again. You can create a new texture right inside of Blender, basically paint on your box. But right now we already have a texture. We just open it here. And let's see where we saved it. All right, I saved it as it was a zip file, same as multiple textures. Cancel that again. Go into my file manager, and I have to unpack it first. And I guess I would have to tell it where to save that texture. I think it saved it in the wrong spot. So let's do that again. Save the file. Ah, right. Okay, I'm using another browser right now, which is not set up to save the images in the right spot. So let's do that right now. Actually, yeah. Save link out. That's what I want. Okay. Always a fun thing when you're changing browsers, and they all work a bit different from each other. So bear with me for a moment, or I just pick another texture, so I can show you what I wanted to do here. Let's open. Yeah, this is close enough. So painted plaster. This is also a brick texture. Let's take this one, painted plaster color. You can see when you unpack the zip file that you downloaded from CC0 or from your favorite texture site, it usually comes with a lot of textures right here. And this is the diffuse map. As I said, every texture or every material is made up out of maps. The color is the diffuse texture map that we want to use right now. And there we can see it is already here. Looks a bit weird right now, but this is the basic color of this brick wall, which has plaster on top of it. So there are brick stones underneath and some plaster on top. And right now you can see it's just a flat texture. There's nothing really important happening here, and nothing interesting. And we can make that better. This is where the other maps come in. Let's look at the normal map next. Normals are the direction of faces. So you have these quad faces, like 4 vertices per face. And each face is looking in a certain direction. So like the top face right here. So here. This top face here is basically looking straight up, while this face on the side is looking this way. This face is looking that way. This defines how light is reflecting on each face. And if you have things like these on a texture, you can imagine that the light is not evenly reflecting in all directions on that face. It would obey like the surface roughness and the imperfections on that surface. So we have to tell our renderer, in this case Blender, how to interpret this texture so the light is bouncing off in the right directions. And this is done with a normal map. So it will, right, it is like the face is pointing in that direction and the normal map is doing like this all over this face. So like this part of the face is pointing this way and that way and this way. So the light is distributed in different directions. Let's copy this image texture, because a normal map is basically an image. So we can just copy this one. Shift D is copying, move it down, place it here, and open the normal texture, which is called normal map. So we have the painted plaster normal in this case. And we can, just to have a look at it, just put it right here to the base texture, and you can see what it looks like. This is how you can identify a normal map. A normal map always looks a bit bluish, in this case, bluish with some purple colors going on, or pink colors going on, and cyan and whatever. It's all this blue stuff, and this is usually a normal map. In some game engines you will see it is more green than blue, because 2 of the channels are swapped. But for Blender, this is usually the correct thing. You need a bluish tint to it. Let's put the color back in. So then you can see here in our material, there is a normal input. And all the inputs and outputs are color-coded. So you know what kind of data you have to put in there. In this case, normal wants vector data. So yeah, I will say data and data all interchangeably because I am not a native speaker. And yeah, wherever my mind is in Australia or in the US, I will just switch back and forth. Right, so normal is a bluish input which says it wants vector data. And you can see that our normal map image is giving us color data. So if you put that right there, it will try to do the right thing, but it's not actually looking very good, right? It is, there you can see a bit of the reflection here. It is doing something and it might even look nice, but it's not correct. So what we have to do is convert the color to normals. And there is a tool for that, a node for that, which we can use in the shader editor. You do Shift A, which is adding something. Always where you're in Blender and you want to add something like a new object or new vertices or anything, Shift A is always the thing that you do. Or you can also go up here, add. It's the same basic function. In this case, we want a vector node, or you can search if you don't know where to find it. In this case, it's vector normal map. That's what we want. You can just search normal map. There it is. Pick it, place it just in between the connection from our normal texture to the normal map input. This will convert it. Just put it in between and it will connect it up. Now you can see here, this is the normal map node. It takes a color input, converts it inside, and puts out a normal vector output. This is what we want. This setting here, tangent space, just leave it like that. You can experiment with it for different mappings. I recommend for starters just keep it like that because there can be very, very strange things happening if you change that. Okay, let's look at it now. Here's our reflection going on. And it's not as glossy as it looked before. And on the other side there, it is a bit more glossy. And we can see, let me just change it back to how we had it before. This is just extreme gloss, basically. And you can't really tell what's going on. And if we put our normal map node in between, it gives a lot more definition on the corners all there. So you see here the normal mapping is already working quite well. And if this is a bit too much, you can dial down the strength. Hold Shift to do that a bit less, in a bit less increments, like this, I would say. And now you can basically already make out the structure. This is a bit higher and this is a bit lower recessed. All this going on here. On the other side, the reflections are basically not there because the light is coming from the other side here. Okay, this is the second texture, the second map that we use. Third one that we are going to use this time, there are more if you're really getting serious, but this time just let's use the basic three, which is diffuse map, normal map, and the third one is roughness. Roughness map means an object will not reflect the light in the same strength at all places, because like if you have a mirror, for example, and someone touches the mirror with the hands, they will leave smudges, fingerprints on that mirror, and you don't want the reflection to be as strong at the spots where the fingerprints are. So you would make a map that defines the places where the fingerprints would be, and that would dial down the reflections, the specularity, as we say, and increase the roughness of the object. And we already have such a map. Let's add a new image texture. I forgot one thing I will show you in a moment. So openness and find our, what did we use? Painted plaster. The roughness map here. And we can have a look at this input here. This is the roughness of this material. We can, of course, change the overall. Let me just find an angle where you can see it. Overall roughness. Yeah, this is good. So this is completely rough, so there's basically no reflection going on. Even though we have a normal map, you can't really see it. And this is like, this is super shiny. And there is reflections all over the place. You can basically make a mirror out of a wall, as if you just spray painted it with some clear coat or something like that. So let's make it half rough like this. And this is our roughness map. This will define where the wall is supposed to be more rough and where it's supposed to be more reflective. But again, you can see there's a color output, and roughness wants something else. It wants a black and white input. This gray input means it wants basically a one color texture. And we have a 3-color texture right here. Every texture is usually RGB. So we have to convert it again. So let's just put it in. It will work to an extent. So you can see there is a lot more definition in the reflections right here on that flat surface. If I take that away, this is basically flat. And if I put it in here, it gets more definition to the roughness. You can see it reflecting. So we have to convert the color to a black and white map, because roughness maps usually are just black and white. If they are black, there's no roughness. If they're white, it's basically a mirror. So adding a new, or let's just search for it, adding a new node here, which is BW. It's just black and white. So it's RGB to black and white. It will take all the colors of the RGB, compress it into basically a black and white image, and then output it on the other side. You can see again, color input is yellow, the value input is just gray, and that is something that goes in between here. Now we have the correct output format for it, so it looks already better, but it's still not correct, because I forgot something, as I said. What we have here is our color texture, and it has a color space. It's RGB. RGB is the normal color space for digital colors on the screen. But this roughness is not a color image. It is data in form of a texture, which looks, I can show you, like this. Just the black and white. This is non-reflective. This is more reflective. It's just a black and white image, basically, which is not to be seen as an image, but as data. So we have to tell Blender that this image that we are giving into the shader is not an image really, but it is data. So you click on the color space as RGB and tell it is non-color. This is very important if you want to have exact results. So put it in non-color. This will look a little different. You can see the super shiny reflections are now gone. We can see that is a lot less reflective, but here on the bricks there is a bit of reflection going on. This is really what we want. The plaster should be pretty much diffuse, no reflections, and these bricks underneath are made out of clay, I guess, something like that, and it has a shiny surface, so you can see there's something going on there. The same thing is true for the normal map, because I forgot that as well. It's still sRGB, and you can probably immediately see what happens when I put this to non-color where it's supposed to be. Right, now you can see it is much more clear, much more defined. Let's put up the strength a little bit. So the bumps and creases of the surface are now way more clear. So this is very important. Always have the correct form of data, like you have color to color, normal to normal. And if it's not an image, the only time when you want it to be image data is basically for the diffuse. All other cases you want non-color. There are some special things around here like filmic log or raw or linear. All that stuff is only important if you're really, really getting deep into it. And I myself am not really in that space yet. So it's either you use sRGB for the diffuse or you use non-color for anything else. Cool. So now we have basically a texture on it. It's not really a brick wall yet, but we have some texture on it, and it is reacting to light and it's doing a good amount of reflections. But how do we make it into a real brick wall? Let's go back to the layout, where we can have a look at our box, and we want to make it a brick wall. Let's just go into edit mode, select all faces with A, and I'm now assigning the whole box to this. It's still called red material. Assign it. Let's rename it, because now it is not just red, it's a brick material. Just that we can distinguish it from the other material. I'm not sure if we're going to use that, but we'll see. So this is now our brick material. Let's just make it a bit longer and taller, so it looks more like a wall. Going back to edit mode, picking up the top face, and you can use the toolbar on the left to move things up and down, like this. You can see, if we want to see how big it is, go back to object mode and pull out the N panel right here. It's called the N panel because you can press the N key and get it out. The official name is the side panel or sidebar. I always call it the N panel. Everybody calls it the N panel, so it's the N key. It comes up. And go to item, and then you can see the dimensions. So it's 2 meters by 2 meters by 4 meters 55. Let's make it 20 meters by 0.5 meters by 3 meters. Like this. This is more like a wall. And the texture looks horrible. Why does it look horrible? Now we come to everybody's favorite topic in modeling is UV mapping. And that's what you do when you want to tell Blender how to work with the texture around your object. You need to see your texture like a piece of paper. You have a flat piece of paper and you want it to wrap around an object that is not flat, because this, of course, has some depth to it, and if you want to put a piece of paper around it, it won't really go that well. You will have to make cuts and slits and fold the paper around to go around your object. For the default cube, there's already a UV map. This is another map, a UV map provided. And if you have a look at the UV editing workspace up here, let's scroll back so you can see everything. This is where you define the space for your texture. So if you go here, you can click on the individual faces, and you can see that around here, this square is moving around. So if I click here, the square moves up here, and click here, the square moves over here, all this. Okay, click here, it goes up here, all that stuff. So what's happening here? Let's just switch to an image where we can see a bit more. You can always click with the middle mouse button and move these things around if there is something that is hidden on the side. Choose our color right here. This is our image that we loaded before. Quick question from Cass over there in the YouTube chat. If you're rendering large textures with GPU, graphics with your graphics card, what's the limits for a fur image? I need horrendously large maps and still don't have an RTX 3090. Right, yeah, that's a problem, of course. If you are rendering on the GPU, everything, all the data you have needs to fit into your graphics card's memory. The limit is just your graphics card memory. So if you have a huge texture or lots of huge textures, It will try to swap back and forth. So pick that image that it just needs at the moment, put it back, put it into the graphics card render, then put another one in. But it will be very, very slow. So, or at least it will be slower than just pick smaller images. So the limits are very generous, I think. So even if you have several 8K images, so 8000 by 8000 pixel images, it will still work. But at some point, it will complain and say, "Okay, I have no more memory. It doesn't work." I can't really tell you where the limits are in a fixed number because it does depend on your graphics card. But as far as I know, it will use pretty much all your graphics card memory that is available. So if you have 2 gigs on your graphics card, it will use all of that, or at least 90%, as much as it can. If that doesn't work, you have to fall back to CPU rendering, where it is basically unlimited. Some of the models people show on For Affinity will not do well in a group. Yeah. So you can, of course, render things one by one and increase your memory like that. But yeah, or use instancing, so you have several instances of the same object, which only needs to be calculated once. So that helps. Okay, let's see if there's another. No question. Okay. So back to UV unwrapping. That's what it's called. You can see the faces here on the object are mapped to a spot on your texture where this part of the texture will be displayed on the face that you have selected. And you can see this one is square because we had a box before and it was a square box. And this is rectangular, wide rectangular face. So all of this image here will be stretched up here. Yeah, I got that one. Yes. Okay, so stretched right here. How do we change that? We can go here to the UV editor and just mark everything and stretch it. But by the way, one nitpick I have about Blender: if you go into the UV editing space, you want to see the texture on it, right? It doesn't show you the texture on it. This is silly. I think it's really, really silly. I don't know if this is a bug or if it's my setup, but it's really silly. So what I usually do is go up here, pull that to the left, go into the materials preview because I want to see my material. It is slightly see it right here. So materials preview, and this is called the overlays. Lots and lots of stuff there. Ignore all that for now. It's just all the stuff that is rendered on top of your object and all your scenes, all the information. For UV unwrapping, you basically don't want to see any of that. So just switch off all the overlays, like this. This is what we want to see, at least what I want to see. So if we go back here to our UV space, to put the texture on here correctly, we could go and just mark all the vertices and then stretch it out with S, and then in the X direction, or well, in this case it's the Y direction. You can see in the X direction it's just top and down, also top and bottom. S for stretch, Y. Okay, and I can't stretch it any further than this. Why is that? Image doesn't extend further than this. But it is an image that is made to be tiled, so you can put it next to each other. So I could just pull it back up here and it would logically take the stuff from down here, but I need to allow this to happen. So I'm pulling this back over here, go to UV, and there's this option, constraint to image bounds. Disable that. Scale on the Y-axis. Now I can pull it up. Now we can see on our wall, this is looking better already. You can just eyeball it like this. This is not bad. This is one way to do it. It's not the correct way to do it, but you can just see what happens here. And you can scale it up over the whole image, and it tiles nicely. And this is making up your wall now. but I think it is rotated. So this is up and down right here, but I think this brick here is supposed to be left to right. So we could just rotate it, like type in 90 to rotate it 90 degrees. Yeah, this looks better, but still, this is not the way to do it. You want to do it automatically, right? You want to have it working from the start. So I undo that, undo that, undo that, and let Blender do the hard work. So how do we do that? We need to tell Blender, let's go back to our overlays in this case. Go into edit mode, edge select, so I can select all the edges here. Now I can tell Blender how to work with this object to make it look correct. And since it's a wall, I'm not exactly concerned with the bottom face. Click that, delete the face, because we're never going to see it. It's the bottom part of the wall, so it will be hidden. The most important part are the sides here. And the top we might see at some point. So what we are going to do is tell Blender where to get some scissors and snip our texture apart so it can wrap around this object. Question in the YouTube chat, would it be smart to create the objects and meshes in the size or dimensions should be? There is something about that I'm getting to in a moment. Because the UV unwrap, I'm going to show you how to do the unwrap, and it will not work. Because exactly of that question that you're asking. So, because this is something that we will run into, and I want to show you what happens and how you fix it. So, to wrap our texture around, we have to cut it. It's like gift wrapping paper. If you want to wrap up a present, you will have to cut it or fold it. And since we can't really fold, we need to cut. And how to tell that? Tell to Blender how to do this. You choose, let's go back to edge select mode. Select one of the edges here. Go into the edge menu, Control E, or pick it from here, edge. Select it, pick it from here, edge, and mark it as a seam. It will light up in red. So Blender now knows it is allowed to cut up the texture at this point. Or let's just put the seam here. And we can remove the seam from here. Because right now the light is on this side and I want the important bits to be seamless. So there's no seams. Okay. And the top, we want to probably want to have a different texture on top because you have the bricks on the sides and the top is probably coated with some layer of concrete or something like that. So we want this to be a whole separate piece, basically no new material. So I don't want to unwrap it together with the wall. So what I can do is pick all the edges at the top, shift click, actually grab it. There we go. Control E and mark seam again. So this part can be cut all the way around with no relation to the faces around it. So this face will be connected to this face because there's no seam. And on the other side here, bring it around, this face on the back will be connected to the front face because there's no seam. Now we can tell Blender just to unwrap it and do all the work for us. We can do UV and unwrap, or just push the U key and unwrap. Okay, it did something. You can see it here. So it laid out the faces. Let me go to face mode here. Laid out the faces. And this is one of the side faces. I can't really tell which one is which because it unwrapped it the way we wanted it, but it is still, this one is square and this doesn't have the real dimensions. And this is coming back to the questions that we had before in the YouTube chat. Does it have the right dimensions? There is a concept in Blender, at least, I'm not sure if that is in other 3D packages as well, of scale. So an object doesn't only have a size, like this, a dimension. Let's pull out the N panel again. You have the dimensions. It's 20 meters long, 0.5 meters thick, and it's 3 meters high. But it also has a scale, and you can see there are numbers here as well. And what does that mean? Basically, the dimensions tell you the actual physical dimensions of the object in space. And the scale tells you if this is the size the object is supposed to be. So basically the relations of the size top and bottom, left and right. Is this the correct size for this object? You can have a car which is like 4 meters long and 2 meters wide, or you can have a toy car which is just 4 centimeters long and 2 centimeters wide. But the scale is still the same. Because if you take the toy car, and if it's built well, you scale it up to be a real car, it will match the real car. So what we have to tell Blender is that this relationship of length and width and everything is the correct dimensions. Or it's not correct dimension, it's the correct relationship to each other. So the scale is basically, it's called a unit scale. Because it is in all directions 1, 1, 1. But it is not. It is like 10, 0.25, 0.6. So we have to tell Blender this is the correct scale. How do we do that? Either you go into the object menu and go apply scale. This is the easiest way to do it. Or if you want to learn the shortcuts, it's Control A, scale. Now you can see its scale is 1, 1, 1, which means x1, if you have a scale of 1, x is 20 meters. If your scale of 1 in y is 0.5 meters. If I take this object now and scale it up, you can see the scale values is going up and down and the dimensions is going up and down, but it does so uniformly. So the scale x, y, z is always the same value. So Blender can tell this is the relationship of X, Y, and Z that is supposed to be for this object. It will always stay the same. Now, when we do the unwrapping, let's hide this. When we do the unwrapping again for the object, which I can't do now right now because what did I do? I did something wrong. I'm not sure. What did I do? I am in UV editing. Go back here and yeah, something wrong. I'm not exactly sure what happened. This is something that happens in Blender. Sometimes you did something and you don't know what, and now you can't undo the thing that you wanted to do. It works here. So what did I do wrong? Object mode is selected. My box is selected. My box mesh. Okay, I figured it out. Right. So to unwrap an object, you have to be in edit mode, and you have to have something selected to unwrap. If you don't have anything selected, you can't unwrap it. Very logical, but I just didn't see it. Right. So to do this, select everything with A, push U for unwrap, and unwrap the thing. Now you can see it is a bit, let's switch off the overlays. It's a bit large, but the dimensions are correct. And the orientation seems to be correct for these bricks. And if it's not, we can just rotate it. But in this case, let me see. Look on the left, this is our unwrap. And it is not correct for the rotation, but that's fine, we can fix that. Because it always looks from the top down on your object, which it did here. So this is our unwrap. It's a bit small. Let's fix that first. We rotate it around negative 90 degrees. Negative always means counterclockwise. Grab it over here. This looks better. Now, as we did before, just scale it up, but don't do this in X or Y direction because we want to keep the scale as it is. So just scale it up. And this will give us a nice looking wall, I guess. Grab it, move it up a bit, so it fits in our UV space. When you move things around or scale things, hold the shift button. You go in smaller steps, smaller increments, so we can do fine tuning. So like this. What we have now, if we look on the side here, we can select faces. Put the overlays back on in this case. Select a face, and it will show you where in the UV space we are. This is our small texture, and now you have to imagine it's extending all the way through the whole space and just repeating itself. So part of it will be over here. If you click here, this is the front face. This is the side face here. You can see it's all connected to each other because there were no seams. This is the back face. No seams. So it's connected. It's just wrapping around here. And the top face is independent. So you can see it just doesn't care if it works around here because it's in an independent face. It happens to line up, I think, with one of the faces right here. But that doesn't have to be the case because it is cut up, so it could be somewhere else. Okay. This is for simple UV mapping. Put your texture on an object. And you can see the lighting is still working because we are in material preview mode. We can see it. So it's still reflecting from the surface. And this is using the Eevee real-time render engine, so it is not perfect, but it gives you a good idea of how it's going to look. If you render it in cycles in the actual ray tracing or path tracing engine, it will look much better, but it will take longer. This is how you put your materials on your object, basically. Yeah, that's all I had to basically to show you here. If you have anything that you want to know specifically for texturing or anything else, basically, please let me know so we can have a look at it. Otherwise, I might just put more materials on more objects. Like, it's just for fun, because it basically gives us the best view on a material. I'll add a new object, which is a UV sphere. You can see it is like a globe. A globe is called a UV sphere because it has a UV layout that is square. You can see it here. This is our mapping for this globe model. Right click on it, shade it smooth so it looks better. And we slap the same material on it. New. And pick our brick material. Yeah. Just put it on there. Now that we have set up the material correctly, it will just work here. And the UV mapping is correct for it being the default. So they already provided a UV map for us. Yeah, the dimension and scale thing, that is something you will run into all the time, because what you of course will do is add, let's say, another cube, grab it over here, and you say it is flatter, wider, and it's rotated. Rotating is another thing. When you rotate an object and you want it to be, this is my default rotation, then you have to apply the rotation as well. It's the same thing. So if you have done that, and now you want to do something like beveling an edge, so basically make it round. There's Control B, there's a shortcut for it, beveling. You pull it out, and now something is happening, but it's really, really weird. The thing I want to happen is like that it makes a cut straight here to split up the edge here. So again, Control B for bevel, and it does something, but it doesn't really do it right. And it's not doing it right because it looks at the scale of the object, not the dimensions. So it tells me, if I look here on them, go to object mode, it tells me it's this big, but the scale is way off. You can see this, the Z scale is just 0.1. This is 4.3. So it will be 43 times more in that direction than it is in this direction, because it basically thinks it's still a box with equally sized sides. I just squished it a bit. So if I would just go here and make it all equal sides, you can do this. I click and put it down and then just type 1. This is a cool feature. You can click the edge and now bevel it. It will work just fine. And that's because this is, let's just do it so you can see what happens here. Bevel it, put it down. Now scale it on the Z. It does the exact same thing. You can see it is flattened like this. This is what it does. So pick another edge here and bevel it. It will do exactly the same. And if you want it to work correctly, you first have to apply the scale. Then select your edge, because now Blender thinks this is the real dimension, the real aspect ratio basically of this object. Now if you bevel it, it works just fine. So always, if you have some weird things happening like this in a modifier where you can't really see in an operator, this is called an operator, where you just expect it to be uniform around the whole thing and it just doesn't do that, then apply your scale, apply your rotation. It depends on, in this case, you don't need to do rotation so much. But look at the scale and rotation, it might just be off. Right? Rolling forward my mouse wheel a bit, can make it a bit rounder. There we go. Click, that's it. Now I have a nice round edge, even on a flattened object, because I applied my scale. This is something I didn't do at first, because you should see that it even takes that into account for UV mapping and everything else, or for lighting. If you have normal maps on there, it will not really look correct when you stretch it, because it takes that into account as well. So always have a look that your scale is correct once your object is basically modeled out and finished. Okay, just a quick thing. This looks very jagged. We don't want that. We don't want it to be smooth. This will screw up everything around it. You can see it. There's a trick if you run into this. Very simple. Go into the mesh data of your object. Go to normals, because this has to do with normals. Normals are for smoothing out your object. Just tell it to auto smooth. And there we go. Fixed. I hope that helped. So yeah, thank you very much for being here, and I hope that this gave you a bit of insight how to work with materials and with textures, how to put them on objects and make it interesting. And if you want, we can have a look more deeply into this, how to make an object like really reflective, or how to create your own normal maps. If you have an image and a photograph of your wallpaper, or a photograph of some wood grain that you did, but you need a normal map for that or something, you can create all these yourself. So we can do that maybe next time, or we'll see what happens. Okay. So can't see anything else. No questions, no comments. All right. Then I guess that's it for me for the moment. Thank you very much for joining in. And yeah, practice, have fun, and maybe show me what you did. Yeah, bye-bye.